Please be advised that this video contains discussion of homophobic and transphobic individuals and laws. On April 26, 2023, Disney filed to sue DeSantis. And let's be honest, this was a long time coming. Over the last year and a half, as it's pretty common knowledge, DeSantis has been in a one-way pissing contest with the House of Maps. With that much time, there's a lot of ground to cover. So let's go through what exactly has been happening, what it means for the parties involved, and most importantly, what it means for the rest of us. Let's start where most stories do, at the beginning, 1967, a couple of weeks before crews broke ground on the Magic Kingdom. Florida's then Governor Claude Kirk signed a bill into law establishing the Reedy Creek Improvement District, giving the area a board of directors made up of the property owners to govern the functions of the district. Ultimately, they handled fairly boring stuff: street lighting, garbage collection, water and sewer services, pest control. But the biggest thing they handled is some of the taxes. And this is far from a unique case. Even today, Florida has a multitude of special districts for a multitude of different reasons. But this one was made because of Disney for a couple of reasons. Firstly, to make sure taxpayers didn't have to pay for the general public services and infrastructure of Walt Disney World. And second, to keep all of Walt Disney World under one governing body, because the land spanned both Orange and Osceola counties. Since then, that's mostly what they've done. Your average person wouldn't care in the slightest, and frankly, your average person still probably doesn't care. But I feel like this is really important context for the powers of Reedy Creek, how it affects Disney, and where it's going to go from here. Now to get to the actual story. January 11th, 2022, HB 1557. The Parental Rights in Education Bill, or the significantly more appropriately named the Don't Say Gay Bill, was filed in the Florida House of Representatives by Representatives Aaron Grahl and Joe Harding. A bill that effectively bans speaking about anything queer in classrooms in grades 3 and below. Let's call it for what it is. It's a homophobic attempt to silence the queer community. It is definitively a bad law, written to be extremely vague to avoid repercussions, not to mention just directly targeting language like classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Because of course, it's only appropriate for kids if it's cisgender and straight. Look, rightfully so, people were not happy. And so many pleaded to Florida to not sign this bill into law. A thing that we've been seeing over and over again in that state. At this time, a lot of folks also looked to Florida's largest taxpayer to say something, anything. But Disney stayed silent. At first. After protests, Disney eventually released an extremely lukewarm statement. Then CEO Bob Chapek addressed the bill a little more directly internally in an email to that company. But it was still really lukewarm. Chapek was saying what he had to look decent. His words weren't matching the damage the bill was going to do to LGBTQIA+ people in Florida. A couple days later, Chapek finally publicly speaks on the bill at Disney's annual shareholder meeting, saying this.
While we've been strong supporters of the community for decades, I know that many are upset that we did not speak out against the bill. Now, we were opposed to the bill from the outset, but we chose not to take a public position on it because we thought we could be more effective working behind the scenes, engaging directly with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
It's pretty clear Chapek was in full damage. He didn't wait for the question, he tried to get ahead of it, but the damage was already done. Already, no one liked him. This was after many unpopular decisions Chapek made regarding Disney parks and Disney just in general. So while he was making steps in the right direction, he was really only making things worse for himself. unsurprisingly, DeSantis, being the ego-driven sleazeball he is, had to release a statement on it and start to pick the fight.
I also think that you have companies like a Disney that are going to say and criticize parents' rights. They're going to criticize the fact that we don't want transgenderism in kindergarten and first grade classrooms. If that's the hill that they're going to die on, then how do they possibly explain lining their pockets with their relationship from the Communist Party of China? Because that's what they do, and they make a fortune, and they don't say a word about the really brutal practices that you see over there at the hands of the CCP. And so in Florida, our policy is going to be based on the best interest of Florida citizens, not on the musing of global corporations.
And thus the fight began. Disney finally released a decent statement on opposing the bill after more protests, a garbage employee town hall from Chapek, also leaked, and employee walkouts, which, of course, DeSantis responded to. You'll start to see the pattern very quickly. On March 29th, DeSantis signed the bill into law. Then only 2 days later, he begins to talk of repealing the Reedy Creek Improvement District, an act of blatant retaliation, not even hidden. Now, DeSantis did say that it wasn't retaliation.
Well, I would not say that that'd be retaliatory. I mean, the way I view it is, there are certain entities that have exerted a lot of influence through corporate means to generate special privileges in the law. I don't think we should have special privileges in the law at all. And so I don't think it's retaliatory. I just think that Disney's posturing has alienated a lot of people now, and so the political influence they're used to wielding, I think, has dissipated. And so the question is, why would you want to have special privileges in the law at all? And I don't think that we should.
Yeah, that's the quote. That's the quote. That's genuinely like a kid saying that you didn't eat the candy when their face is completely covered in chocolate. From there, it's all retaliation. In April, DeSantis expanded a special session specifically to cover a bill eliminating the RCID, which he signed into law on April 22nd, 3 days later. Then, in May, he began to talk about the state government taking over the district when the bill goes into effect in June 2023. And from there, things on the specific front got quiet for a little bit. The Don't Say Gay bill wasn't going to go into effect until June 2022, and honestly, we had a couple of significantly more important and notable occurrences of people making the world a shit place occurring to worry about anyways. This tale is going to pick up in November 2022. DeSantis had just beat Charlie Price for his second term as Florida's governor. We were enjoying Black Panther Wakanda Forever in theaters, and oh yeah.
Bob Iger is returning to the Walt Disney Company.
Bob Iger is back at the top of Disney.
Bob Iger announcing his return as CEO of Disney.
Bob Iger was back at Disney. Fans were ecstatic. Gone were the days of the money-hungry Bob paycheck and the prodigal CEO return. Look, I'm not going to sit here and worship the CEO. And I'm not going to say Chapek was a better CEO than Iger, because clearly he wasn't. But we all might have been a little too excited about it. Just a skosh. Anyways, Iger held his first town hall with the employees a little over a week after the announcement. And it being one of the biggest points of contention for Disney, he had to talk about the bill. He actually had fairly good things to say. Reportedly, he's quoted as saying, "This company has been telling stories for 100 years, and those stories have had a meaningful positive impact on the world. And one of the reasons they have had a meaningful positive impact is because one of the core values of our storytelling is inclusion and acceptance and tolerance, and we can't lose that." And of course, DeSantis is one. We eventually got some clarification from a prepared statement from DeSantis' communications director, Taryn Fenske, saying, "The corporate kingdom has come to an end. Under the proposed legislation, Disney will no longer control its own government, will live under the same laws as everyone else, will be responsible for their outstanding debts, and will pay their fair share of taxes. Imposing a state-controlled board will also ensure that Orange County cannot use this issue as a pretext to raise taxes on Orange County residents." So, more incitement? And that's really been the name of the game for DeSantis. Poke and prod and jab whenever he can. press conferences, prepared statements, his own damn book. He's taken every opportunity to get a shot in because, frankly, it was working for him and his base. So, February 27th, he took a fairly big step in all of this and officially established his replacement for the Reedy Creek Improvement District. The Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, or the CFTOD, because I refuse to say that mouthful for as much as we're about to talk about this group. They're handpicked board by DeSantis, and we've got a real who's who of his bigoted supporters on this list. So let's go through them. Bridget Ziegler, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, a so-called parental rights advocacy organization that really just spreads anti-LGBTQIA bile and hatred. You may know them from such hits as constantly being a part of the book bans around the United States and the biggest proponents of the Don't Say Gay bill. Next up, we have Ron Perry, CEO and chairman of Radix International. But more interestingly, CEO of The Gathering, a Florida-based ministry in which he preaches seeking to destigmatize Christian nationalism. After him, we have Martin Garcia, a Tampa lawyer whose private investment firm, Pine Hill Capital Partners, donated $50,000 to DeSantis' campaign in 2022. After him, we have Michael A. Sasso, an Orlando lawyer and leader of the Orlando chapter of the Federalist Society, who donated roughly $9,000 to conservative candidates, including, you guessed it, Ron DeSantis. Now, I talked about Michael Sasso, but it's worth noting that since the original recording of this video, Michael Sasso has resigned from the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. He has since been replaced by Charabel Barakat. Some information on Barakat: he is the Regional General Counsel for D.R. Horton Incorporated, and he currently serves as Commissioner for the 2nd District Court of Appeal Judicial Nominating Commission. Also worth noting, he is the Vice President of the Federalist Society for Tampa Bay. So, not a ton to changing in who this person is, it's just another person now in that role. Finally, we have Brian Ongst Jr., a local land use attorney, former chairman of the Regional Chamber of Commerce, and former nominee to the Judicial Nominating Commissions in Florida. Goodbye, once again, Ron DeSantis. So, DeSantis comes in, throws his supporters into this board that was clearly established to try to control Disney, and is still saying that it isn't retaliation. Like, dude, come on. You are not fooling anybody. So the CFTAD has their first meeting a little over a week after being created. It was fairly low-key, mostly a we're here now, deal with it kind of meeting. They alluded to some stuff, but overall it was really just setting the stage for the legal fuckery they and DeSantis were going to pull in the next couple months. DeSantis and the CFTOD were essentially planning to take over the district and make things harder for Disney going forward, likely in the form of higher taxes and further state control of land. The CFTOD's establishment was the biggest step in that direction, and outside of the comments about DeSantis' retaliation, Disney stayed fairly quiet until they enacted the King Charles Clause. Remember when the Florida House voted on giving DeSantis control of Reedy Creek? February 9th? Well, let's go back one day before that on February 8th. The day that the Reedy Creek Board signed a long-lasting development agreement with Disney. The agreement gave a lot of building control back to Disney, along with protecting their intellectual property. Particularly, the board isn't allowed to use any of Disney's names or characters. Disney no longer needed approval from the board to build high-density projects or buildings of any height. They essentially had full control over their own land, which was taking away a ton of the CFTOD's plans. This was the major power they had over Disney, especially as Disney wraps up their current refurbishments and additions to Walt Disney World, and they're planning on new ones, major new additions. What ultimately made this deal so big, though, is how long it will last. The agreement uses the clause often seen in the United Kingdom for trust. Declaration shall continue in effect until 21 years after the death of the last survivor of the descendants of King Charles III, King of England, living as of the date of this declaration. To put it lightly, this is an agreement that will last for decades, quite literally for lifetimes, and it's all entirely legal. Since it got everybody by surprise, arguments were thrown out that the proper people were not informed when the meeting took place. However, the meeting was totally fine in accordance with Florida's government and the Sunshine Law. It was simply that no one was paying attention. Remember when I said at the beginning of the video that no one cared about the Reedy Creek Improvement District? I wasn't kidding. These kind of moves were able to be made because of that. Nobody was watching them. Now at this point, we're over a year through this. A pattern has emerged. I think you know what's going to happen next. Congratulations, you guessed it. DeSantis responded yet again.
But ultimately, my job is not to kowtow to some woke corporation in Burbank, California. My job's to stand up for the children of my state. And it got into a big back and forth. And, at the end of the day, these companies, first of all, I don't know that it's the appropriate use of shareholder resources to be shilling for gender ideology in kindergarten. But nevertheless, that's what they decided to do. They basically got everything they wanted for the many decades they've been operating in Florida until now. Because now there's a new sheriff in town. We've taken away their self-governing status. There's a lot of little back and forth going on now with the state taking control, but rest assured, you ain't seen nothing yet. There's more to come in that regard.
And he tries to do so. Moving on to April 2023, and oh my God, so much happened in April. On April 3rd, DeSantis ordered Chief Inspector General Melinda Miguel to find any legal or ethical violations in the actions of the now dissolved Reedy Creek Improvement District. Meanwhile, Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody began to look into things as well, particularly in emails and text messages from board members, district employees, etc. Let me show you how that went. It didn't. There was nothing to find. More interestingly, the same day, Disney was holding their annual shareholder meeting. Unsurprisingly, there were a couple of questions about everything. It was Bob Iger's first annual shareholder meeting since coming back. One was about how Disney planned on protecting shares given the legal battle with DeSantis, and another horribly homophobic question about why Disney should, quote, ditch the LGBTQIA and gender ideology for good, which is just a ridiculous statement. And while the second question was clearly vile, Bob Iger actually gave some very interesting responses to both questions.
We love the state of Florida, and I think that's reflected in not only how much we've invested over the last 50 years, but how much we've given back in the form of jobs and community service, taxes, which you brought up, tourism, of course, and all sorts of other responsible business practices. We've also always respected and appreciated what the state has done for us. It's kind of been a two-way street. But a year ago, the company took a position on pending Florida legislation. And while the company may have not handled the position that it took very well, a company has a right to freedom of speech just like individuals do. And obviously, in taking the position, the governor got very angry about the position Disney took. And it seems like he's decided to retaliate against us, including the naming of a new board to oversee the property and the business. In effect, to seek to punish a company for its exercise of a constitutional right. And that just seems really wrong to me, against any company or individual, but particularly against a company that means so much to the state that you live in. And so our point on this is that any action that thwarts those efforts, simply to retaliate for a position the company took, sounds not just anti-business, but it sounds anti-Florida.
As you can imagine, everyone reported on the anti-Florida quote, which is not surprising. It's massive. But I was significantly more interested in the thought process of Disney's storytelling and the positive impact it can have.
And we've been telling stories for 100 years that are aimed at entertaining and inspiring families from all over the world. And we're extremely proud of the positive impact we've had on billions of people over that 100-year period of time. And for generations, the stories that we've told have touched people's hearts because they've been infused with right values. They've celebrated heroes and emphasized the value of family and friendship. They've instilled a steady faith in the belief that good triumphs over evil. that tomorrow is always brighter than today. I want parents to be able to trust the content that we're creating for their children, and we're committed to delivering age-appropriate content for family audiences while also telling stories that reflect the world around us and that foster a greater understanding, greater perspective, greater acceptance of all people. And it's just my hope that Disney continues to be a source of hope and optimism for the world, and we're honored to actually carry forth Walt's legacy of inspiring joy and wonder for everyone.
Now, I know you know what happened next. DeSantis responds. At this point, DeSantis is doing an appearance at Hillsdale College in Michigan. He's saying crazy shit.
Well, Disney is a joke because in the late 60s, they were given by the Florida legislature their own government in Central Florida. So they've lost their own government. We've put the state in charge with a control board. Now, it's interesting, the media tried to get spun up about Disney trying to do these agreements, very quietly right before we took control, and they're acting like somehow that they pulled one over on the state. There'll be a lot of that comes out over the next month or two, but suffice it to say, the legislature is going to avoid anything Disney did on the way out the door. But ultimately, we're going to win on every single issue involving Disney. I can tell you that.
From there, we keep moving. On April 11th, the CFTOD had another meeting introducing the Superior Authority Amendment to the RCID Land Development Regulations. When passed, this would give the board power over the district, but also the cities of Lake Buena Vista and Bay Lake. It also states that the CFTOD will officially replace the Reedy Creek's Planning Board, allowing them to make development decisions and be the final decision-making authority for the district, and that no further administrative appeal is available. To sum it all up, all of the power goes to the CFTOD, and they never have to give it back. Moving forward to April 17th, DeSantis gave his most threatening statement to Disney yet.
So if you look at this whole special district, Walt Disney Corporation obviously owns a lot of it, but the district owns other land. Quite frankly, I wasn't even thinking about that land. This was not something that was really important one way or another. We just wanted them to live under the same rules, pay the debt, pay the taxes, all that stuff. Oh, but come to think of it, now people are like, well, what should we do with this land? And so, it's like, okay, people have said, maybe have another, maybe create a state park, maybe try to do more amusement parks. Someone even said, like, maybe you need another state prison. Who knows? I just think that the possibilities are endless.
And they begin to act on some of it. A few weeks later, SB 1250 gets brought into the Florida Senate, but we'll get to that in a second. On April 19th, the CFTOD found another agreement the old board made with Disney, allowing them to set their own utility rates for the resorts through 2032. Now this, combined with the King Charles Clause, had obviously not sat right with DeSantis and his cronies, because the next day, Senator Blaise Ingoglia filed an amendment to Florida's land use and development regulations that nullifies any deal made within 3 months before a special district's leadership changes hands because of the law. Essentially, the King Charles Clause and utility rate deals would be null and void if this law passes. At this point, Disney finally has their lobbyists step up and fight against DeSantis, and we get another wonderfully incorrect quote from DeSantis.
We've been able to operate an administration that does not get consumed in petty controversy or drama.
Seriously, I love that one. If you've made it this far, you clearly know that is not the case, and yet he still says this shit. But let's go back to SB 1250. Filed by Republican Senator Nick DeKegley, this bill says government safety inspections are privately owned fixed guideway transportation systems operated in the state which are located within an independent special district created by local act, which have boundaries within 2 contiguous counties. Whew, that's a mouthful. But when you start to narrow it down, you get an extremely specific list. In fact, you get one item: the Walt Disney World monorail system. This is something Disney has avoided for some time now. Worst case scenario, the Florida Department of Transportation can shut down the monorail system for inspections in the middle of a busy day, which will completely cut off transportation for many, many guests. And It would certainly hamper Disney sales that day. For reference, the monorail is used for transportation for both Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and is used by both Florida locals at the transportation center and resort guests from various different hotels. And finally, we come full circle. April 26, 2023. The morning the CFTOD declares superior authority and that the Reedy Creek Improvement District failed to properly notify landowners of their last meeting. Even though there were 2 public hearings and the Orlando Sentinel was notified and the notification was printed. Their argument is that such notices published in the newspaper do not fully inform the public or other property owners of the purposes or contents of the development agreement, and how other property owners and the taxpayers of the district were affected by such proposed agreement. Now, not entirely surprising, this was the easiest argument that they could possibly make against those agreements, but that's still not even the big ticket news item for the day. That still belongs to Disney filing their lawsuit. Minutes after the CFTOD declared superior authority, Disney filed a suit on DeSantis in Tallahassee, asking for a federal judge to void DeSantis' takeover of the Reedy Creek Improvement District on the grounds that he is violating the company's First Amendment rights. We made it. Now, before we actually look at the lawsuit, let's go through the last bit of events that have happened since then, because, of course, stuff keeps happening. Now, DeSantis responds to the lawsuit. Everyone's expecting it. Of course, it happens. His communications director released a statement the day of, and then he responded while giving a talk at Jerusalem's Museum of Tulip.
It's a little bit much to be complaining about that. I don't think the suit has merit. I think it's political. I think they filed, in Tallahassee for a reason, because they're trying to generate, some district court decision. But we're very confident on the law. The days of putting one company on a pedestal with no accountability are over in the state of Florida.
Afterwards, the CFTOD held a special meeting on May 1st to announce that they're countersuing Disney. It's nothing special. All of the arguments they make in the lawsuit are ones we've been hearing about for months. It's very much making them look like heroes and Disney the villains. But DeSantis, of course, wouldn't shut up. He gave a 4-minute spiel during an event all about the lawsuit. It's not worth watching, but his ego was particularly on display here.
For one corporation to basically corrupt a local government, run it as their own fiefdom, be exempt from laws, have all kind of benefits that nobody else has. And yes, I think it's been very disappointing to watch this particular company, what they've done by advocating things like the sexualization of children, very close relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. That's all very problematic, but at the end of the day, it's a question about good governance. And so the people of Florida, through their representatives, made the decision that they should not be able to be a law unto themselves. They should not be able to govern themselves. And so that was done. We had a new oversight and a new board that was put into place. And then what happened was, before that went into effect, they tried to simply contract around what the people had done.
Moving on. Chief Judge Mark E. Walker was assigned to the Disney lawsuit, and he's actually ruled against DeSantis legislation in the past, including on free speech issues. More notably, he ruled against the DeSantis-backed Combating Public Disorder Act that was placed to increase penalties on protests over the death of George Floyd. Walker is also known for striking down DeSantis' Stop Woke Act, calling it positively dystopian. That said, DeSantis' team has filed to disqualify Walker as the judge on the case, stating that 2 previous times in 2 unrelated cases, the court sua sponte offered Disney as an example of state retaliation. We are yet to see if Walker will continue to judge the case, or if he'll pass it on to someone. So, Walker refused himself from the case. However, it's completely unrelated to DeSantis' motion. In fact, he even went as far as to call it rank judge shopping. Anyways, he stepped down, citing a relative within the 3rd degree of a relationship owning 30 shares of stock in the plaintiff's parent corporation, the Walt Disney Company. Now, obviously, Walker stepping down is a pretty big loss for Disney. It was pretty clear which way Walker was going to go. But the judge stepping up might be an even bigger loss for them. Judge Alan C. Windsor is the judge stepping into this case now, which could be really concerning because he has actually ruled in DeSantis' favor in the past. Previously, back in February, he rejected a lawsuit filed by a group of teachers, parents, and students against Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, calling it unconstitutional. Additionally, we also have more information on the CFTOD's local countersuit against Disney. That's going to be starting on July 14th with an hour-long hearing. Finally, May 5th, DeSantis signs the amendment in SB 1604 to nullify the Reedy Creek agreements, something that's actually directly referenced in Disney's lawsuit. Now, I'm no legal expert. I'm just someone with a hyper-focused news YouTube channel. Everything we've gone through so far has been reported by actual reporters and those with actual legal expertise. I will always default to them on the facts of all of this. Even still, I want to look at the lawsuit Disney filed. So what did I do with anyone who's incredibly hyper-focused on the story would do? I wasted a lot of paper and ink to print out the entire lawsuit. What can I say? I like to have things on paper, and I had 3 pages to move forward. For this lawsuit, I think the takeaways are knowing exactly what Disney is saying occurred, what laws are being violated, the repercussions that they would like if they win, and the evidence they're initially providing to prove it. So, unsurprisingly, Disney is saying that DeSantis and company violated the First Amendment. But interestingly enough, there are 5 total causes of action that Disney has called out. Violations of the Contract Clause, Taking Clause, and Due Process Clause of the United States Constitution, and First Amendment violations for both the CFTOD and DeSantis and the state government. The First Amendment violations are pretty straightforward. To quote the lawsuit, Disney's public statements on House Bill 1557 are fully protected by the First Amendment, which applies with particular force to political speech. And Tory 3 Constitution of Disney's governing body structure through the enactments of Senate Bill 4C and House Bill 9B have chilled and continue to chill Disney protected speech. Where I think some confusion may lie is in the other violation. The Contracts Clause is Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution, saying that the state can't pass any law that impairs the obligation of contracts. Disney's argument is that by shutting down their building contracts made before the establishment of the CFTOD, the government has impeded this right. Additionally, they note that this was not necessary to serve an important government interest as required to survive contract clause scrutiny. Basically, the government had no legitimate reason to get rid of Disney's contracts, and even if they did, this was a drastic reaction when a simpler reaction could have sufficed. Next up is the Takings Clause, part of the Fifth Amendment. It says that no private property will be taken for public use without just compensation. This one is fairly simple, given that Disney's development agreement gave Disney long-term rights over the use of land, and that land is no longer available to them, and Disney was never granted any compensation. The government broke this clause. It's fairly easy. Finally, we have the Due Process Clause, part of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Disney's argument is that the CFTOD cannot prove that their actions were only to promote state interests, and they can't prove that the dissolution of Disney's contracts was reasonably necessary. These requested repercussions are fairly simple in all of this. Declare Senate Bill 4C and House Bill 9B unlawful and unenforceable. Give back Disney's property rights. Declare that Disney's previous contracts are still in effect and or that they're legal to exceed. Basically, just reset everything to how it was before. Now, evidence is ultimately the interesting thing of this lawsuit. Watch any legal drama or take a high school government class, and you'll know that the evidence is going to be one of the most important parts of this case. And looking through the thing and the factual background Disney's compiled, it's fairly clear that DeSantis is digging his own grave. Direct quotes are pulled from DeSantis specifically, 34 separate times in the lawsuit. Funnily enough, 4 of them are from his own memoir, which really feels like an easily avoidable situation for him. His supporters are also quoted. Much of the evidence came from the CFTOD, but DeSantis' grandstanding is certainly the center of this case. Arguments could possibly be made if he hadn't run his mouth as much as he did, but those arguments would probably be extremely weak. Unsurprisingly, Disney is citing a lot of the damage that has actually been done to the company on the dissolution of Reedy Creek and the foundation of the CFTOD, with Senate Bill 4C and House Bill 9B respectively, pointing out high irregularities, like Senate Bill 4C being filed and the special session, and then it completely being signed, passed, and everything 3 days later. Looking through this, to me, Disney has a fairly rock-solid case, but I am far from impartial. I think I've made it pretty clear how much I hate DeSantis. The sheer amount of evidence that they have, though, against him is astounding, and he is a complete meathead. But also, look at the world we're stuck in. Crazier things have happened. Why has all this gone down, and what happens next? Well, look at the musings of pretty much any political analyst, even just dude on the side of the street, and you'll see a consensus on DeSantis. He's been doing this to look good for his presidential run, pitting himself as the hero against a big bad Disney and their liberal ideologies. And for the most part, unfortunately, it's worked. He was the forerunner for a while, and now it's looking like polls are putting him in second. I mean, he's gotten a lot of press from this. And we've seen time and time again that conservatives are not going to stop their homophobic and transphobic bandwagon anytime soon. DeSantis has made this a point to use this as a focal point for his story that he's putting out there, how he's fighting back against these woke companies. That said, flying back to Florida, signing the abortion ban, giving a quick jab at Disney, and then running to Ohio to speak about his book, all while Fort Lauderdale is flooding, was not a good look for him for anybody's perspective. He's doubling down on his book and his fight against Disney, and it seems that he might be losing some backing because of that. That said, I still think he's going to try and do as much damage to Disney as he possibly can for that lawsuit. And realistically, both lawsuits are likely to get appealed, but they're over. This is a story that is far from over. Meanwhile, Disney likely can continue doing what they're doing. We already see Disney working on stuff for California parks, and we know that there's an initiative that they want to push more anyways with Disneyland Forward. Not to mention Disney's parks all around the globe, their film production, television, etc. Disney may take a hit monetarily, but it won't hurt them. It's pretty common to know you don't go up against the House of Mouse. They have all the time and all the money they need to take us anywhere in any way they want it. Disney will win. Hear me on that. Disney will always win. So why be worried about any of this? Well, people like Ron DeSantis, these bigoted people in places of immense power, are terrifying. As we have seen time and time again, they can cause serious harm. Florida is becoming a fascist state controlled by DeSantis, where you can't be who you are unless he approves it. Hell, if you speak poorly about it. DeSantis has Florida in a state where if he doesn't like something, he has a law passed. We're seeing this right now with him trying to pass a law that allows him to stay governor while he runs his presidential campaign. And let's be honest, DeSantis' presidential run was always inevitable. But the fight against Disney has proven he is too stubborn for his own good. And not just one political ideology or the other. He is digging his own hole. Just look at the numerous quotes in Disney's lawsuit, or even just the quotes throughout this video. The power and potential damage, though, is still concerning. He's already deeply affected Florida. We are losing that fight in Florida with the damage he has done there. Hopefully, this has put a hurdle in front of him, being able to cause any more damage on a larger scale. The laws he's implemented and will implement in Florida are not going anywhere, and realistically, they're not staying in Florida. This is going to spread amongst red states. Florida feels like a trial run for how vile and dangerous can we make a state for queer people. Hopefully, all of this can help at least one person, because honestly, we could use the win. Unfortunately, though, even if we win and stop a DeSantis nomination, the alternative might be so much worse. On the Disney side, I'll be the first to admit that I don't love that we treat corporations. But I also realize that already the world we're stuck in, and we're making the most of it. If there's any company you want to back you, it's Disney. Despite the statements, despite the gesture of goodwill, you gotta remember that Disney is still a corporation. A corporation's first and foremost rule is to make money. Disney's not perfect. Despite how much we love their products and contents here, trust me, we love their content. We will always be the first to remind you about that. I don't want to sit here and praise Disney for being so good at legal maneuvering either. Don't get me wrong. I truly hope that Disney squashes DeSantis like the gnat he is. It's still terrifying when you stop and take a look at the power Disney has, especially in music. Luckily, in this particular case, they seem to be aiming it in the right direction. So honestly, I don't know what happens next. I'm not a political analyst. I'm no lawyer genius. But if there's anything to be seen in the patterns over the last year and a half, it's that DeSantis is going to continue down this road till the very end. And at least in his fight with Disney, Disney will spot him back at every attempt. From there, we can only hope and see what happens next.